The first thing I'm going to do is place a small amount of buttercream onto the piping nail. This is purely to stick the little piece of parchment onto it. So the first flower shape I'm going to show you is a flat daisy-like flower. I want the smallest point of the tip facing away from the center and place the piping bag flat. And with an even pressure, I'm going to squeeze out the buttercream into a small arch shape. And naturally, it creates a petal. I'm going to do the exact same thing right next to the petal I've just piped and keep going, piping these petals next to each other until I've got back where I started. I'm just going to complete this by adding a small blob of yellow buttercream in the middle. And there you go, a perfect little flower. So the next flower I'm going to show you is a rose. Now this flower does require some practice, but it is using the same piping tip. Once again, I'm going to secure that piece of parchment onto the nail with a little bit of buttercream, but angle the piping tip totally differently this time. This time I want the tip facing upwards, so the small part of the tip facing to the ceiling. I'm then going to pipe one big circle around each other, and that's actually going to act as the bud of the flower. And now I have something to pipe on. So what I'm going to do, in a slight arched movement once again, only this time going up and down, is pipe individual petals around that center bit of buttercream. So I'm bringing the angle of the piping bag outwards, and that makes the flower open. Slide it off, and onto the board it goes. So this next tip is also a petal tip, but it is slightly rounded. So again, the tip has a thin part, so I'm going to position it in the same way, but you'll see the difference. This creates more of a peony-like flower. The petals are naturally curved and more closed. So as I pipe layers upon layers, you can see that the effect is slightly different to the rose, but still just as gorgeous. And peonies are my favorite flowers, so I absolutely love making these ones. So this next tip is actually called a leaf tip, and you'll see why later on when I pipe some leaves with it, but it's actually a great way to create different types of petals too. And holding the piping bag sideways, all I'm going to do is push and pull, and that is how you get this leaf or petal-like shape. If you were to do this in green, it would look like leaves, but if you do it in another color, such as yellow like I have, it looks more like a flower. I'm going to put a little bit of brown in the middle, and it sort of resembles a sunflower. So this is another quick way how to create another flat piped flower. This next tip is also called a petal tip, but you can see it's a completely different shape to the last one. It kind of looks like a smiley face. Now I find this tip one of the hardest ones to use because it's really difficult to control the same amount coming out the piping bag each time you pipe with it. If you drag the petals too far, they can get a bit soft and flimsy and not really hold their shape. So you actually want to do shorter petals than you think and try and keep the same action on every petal that you pipe. But you can see that the shape of this tip gives a beautiful 3D curved petal effect. And pipe layer upon layer, going from the outside inwards. I find it easier doing it this way. You can start from the inside if you want, but I feel like that the petals that you've already piped get in the way of the ones that you're trying to create. So I like going from the outside in. So now I've shown you how to use the 4 different piping tips. You can of course get as creative as you want. You can put different colors in the piping bags, you can create different sizes. It's all dependent on what you want to use it for. So once these have gone in the freezer and chilled, I'm going to apply it to a small cake. So I want to keep these flowers on the slightly smaller side. If however you are doing a larger cake or decorating large cupcakes, then by all means create larger flowers. Something else to consider, as you always should when you're decorating a cake, is to keep within a color theme and make sure all the colors go with each other. So naturally I use more of a pastel palette. So I've got the pinks, yellows, blues and purples. I wouldn't go with anything too bright, otherwise it starts to look very unnatural. So as I said before, I'm going to use these flowers to decorate this mini cake. So this is a ready crumb coated 4-inch cake. It's a small cake but really cute and perfect for 4 to 5 people to enjoy. And I've got a piping bag with the green buttercream inside with the small leaf tip on the end. Some of these piping tips work great as fillers. So as I said, this is a small leaf tip. and I have 2 shades of green inside to add depth and detail. And I use it the same way as I did when I was making the petals. I push, stop squeezing, and then pull away, and that's how you create the leaf tip. The reason why I saved the leaves until this point is because these are going to act as an adhesive for the flowers so they can stick onto the cake, as well as add a leafy background. So I'm going to dot around a few leaves, roughly mapping out where I want to put the flowers. So kind of in this crescent shape on the top, and then coming down the front as a waterfall. Now this is very rough, and I'm sure I'll be adding more afterwards, but it's good to map out where you want to place the flowers because you need to work quickly once they come out the freezer. And as you can see, you can simply pick up the flower into your hands and it comes right off the paper all in one. And these will go directly on the cake. So as I said, you do need to work fast, especially if you have warm hands like I do, because otherwise the flowers will start melting in your hands. But really simply, choose a flower, take off the parchment and place it onto the cake, and go on with the next one. Now I'm conscious of mixing colors and shapes as much as possible, so I'll try and separate pinks and blues from one another. And of course I'm going to add buttercream in places that I want to place the flowers if I haven't done so already. And because I'm using the leaf tip, it only adds to the effect if you do end up seeing the leaves, rather than just blobs of buttercream. If at any point the flowers start to feel a little bit soft, then you can pop them back in the freezer for another 5 to 10 minutes. I'm going to come down the front and place some flowers on the leaves that I've already piped. You can, of course, just stick to 2D or 3D flowers, but I like a nice balance between the two. Just makes it more interesting. And keep filling in with those leaves and other piping tips to give this fuller effect, because you don't really want to see any gaps in between the flowers. A couple more leaves and then we are done. So there you go. A piped buttercream flower cake tutorial. Of course, you can apply these buttercream flowers to cupcakes, different types of desserts. I'm just showing you this example here, but give it a go, try them out.